Now, talk to me just for a second about why it's important to take enzymes. For those that didn't listen to our last podcast, and I hope that they do, but for those that don't, maybe they're on a quick schedule, talk about the enzyme bank that you've shared with me before, and talk about why it's important, especially in our later years in life, 40s, 50s, 60s, why it's so important to take enzymes with every single meal.
Empowering you organically, delivering content you trust with results you love.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Empowering You Organically. I'm your host, Jonathan Hunsaker, joined by my good friend, Wade Lightheart. Wade, thanks for joining me, sir.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So listen, Wade is an expert on digestion, specifically on enzymes, and we just wrapped up another podcast that I continue to learn more and more every time I talk to Wade. If you have not listened to that podcast, go listen to it. But we wrapped up that podcast talking about enzyme supplements, and Wade has helped consult to us on the new formula of our new proteolytic enzyme. So I just wanted to have Wade on here to talk about it because he is way smarter than I am in this. It's why I went out and consulted with Wade, and we're having him on the podcast. And it's what I do, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an academic, but I do go find the smartest people in the world for those different areas. And Wade is that guy. So thanks again, Wade, for being here.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
So let's talk for a second about proteolytic enzymes, right? And what is the importance there? Because I think when most people think about an enzyme, they go to the store, they get a broad spectrum enzyme that's out there. But let's talk for a second why an enzyme needs to be very proteolytic, or why that needs to have the protease enzymes in there that makes it proteolytic. And then let's talk about the cost of creating those other kinds of enzyme supplements versus what you've helped us create here.
You got it. Thank you very much. So we have to people, when you're talking about enzyme supplementation, the most important enzymes that are relative to human function for recovery and growth and repair means you have to convert protein into amino acids. And the only way that you do that is if you have a full spectrum proteolytic enzyme blend that works in the variance the pH inside your stomach. Because when the food hits your stomach, hydrochloric acid is released about 30 to 60 minutes after. And what happens is as the pH changes, certain proteins will get broken down to amino acids at the different pH levels. Enzymes will become activated at some levels and deactivated at other pH levels. So there's not like 1 in 100 companies that are actually addressing the pH conditions around proteolytic enzymes. And that's why so many formulations actually suck. And I understood this because, in order for me to compete as an athlete, as a bodybuilder whose primary function was to convert the protein I was eating into amino acids to recover from my insane training, and I had to have a proteolytic enzyme in order to do that. And so I dove deep into the science years and years and years ago. And what we came up with is we found out that if you're doing an enzyme formulation, you're going to need something we're in the range of 80 to 1,000 huts. That's the unit that it takes to break it down. And you needed to make sure that you had enzymes that covered the pH ranges at 3, at 4.5, and at 6. Actually, that range will actually go from about 2 to about 9 in the pH level, which will break down virtually every amino acid inside the body into a usable state. So when it gets to your digestive tract, you're not having gas and bloating and acid reflux and indigestion. You are just converting that protein into the amino acids that are going to transport for the building blocks for the neurochemicals to run your brain. All of that stuff is critical to proteolytic production. And that's why you need protease inside the body.
Why do most supplements out there, why is 99 out of 100, why don't they do that? Or why do they just add one protease enzyme in there?
Well, you and I are well versed in this situation that's happening in what I would say the natural health products space. And that is, unfortunately, there's maybe 5% of the companies out there that are people like yourself who are driven by passion, by purpose, and are on a mission, not for profits, but for performance. And yes, and the thing is what happens, I'll give you an example here, right? I've got a magazine here, right here, which is, on your store shelf, which is talking about gut health and it's talking about probiotics and enzymes that you'd get at this checkout counter. So what happens is a company will see whatever trend comes out of the New England Journal of Medicine or whatever shows up in Time magazine. They're going to create a Me Too product. Yeah, we got enzymes. Yeah, we got probiotics. Whatever it happens to be, whatever the hot topic is that they're going to throw in here. And right now, gut health is the big topic of du jour in the health community because it's such a crisis right now. And so what happens is somebody with a bunch of dollars says, hey, how can I get some protease in my product? I want the cheapest possible stuff that I get. They have no basics in medical science. They don't care about the mission or purpose. They're riding a trend for profits. They build out a company. They slap a name on it, throw a label on it, turn it out on the store shelves through a distribution model because that makes that store enough money. And guess what? Who pays the price? The consumer. The consumer pays the price. And then the doctor will say to them, well, that stuff doesn't work because 95 times out of 100 people are buying a supplement that doesn't work. It's not a custom engineered and designed to actually work and function. And if you're going to do that, it's the difference between buying a used car at the junkyard or buying the latest and greatest premium brand automotive, which is a completely sealed engine. Like that's the variance that you're having in products today. And so it's only the people that are driven by passion, that are driven by purpose, that are driven to on a bigger mission that actually make the products that are going to deliver. And that's why we're on this call. And that's why I'm taking this, because I know you're one of those guys.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it was quite disturbing when I started going down the rabbit hole and started reaching out to manufacturers and people that could create stuff. And we said, hey, this is a formula we wanted to create, with some of our early products. And they came back and they said, well, if you don't ferment it, if you don't use organic, if you don't mix all these things in there, we can make it for $2.50 a bottle. Yeah, and you can still sell it for $50 a bottle, right? And so it was a rude awakening in that context. But that's when I knew I was on. That's when I knew I needed to do this, right? Was to kind of change that. And you talk about the trends. I mean, we're going to see this with CBD, right? I mean, I went to Expo West last year. It's one of the biggest natural health expos in the world. And everybody and their brother had CBD, and it was the next CBD. And everybody's talking to me about, hey, let's go create a CBD product. The problem is CBD can be effective, but 95% of what's going to be out there is just going to be junk CBD, just that has that label on there. And I want to just relate that to people that are listening so that they can actually see what we're talking about with these current trends. What happens? CBD is everywhere. You're likely not going to see a good effect from it unless you buy it from a good, reputable company that has a history of standing, like you said, for the mission, for the passion, not just for the profits. So away from CBD, back to enzymes. Let's talk, because you helped us create P3E. Hold up a bottle of it just right here. Tell me, I mean, you're so brilliant at all this. Tell me about all of the different enzymes that we put in here and why it's so effective and why it trumps everything else on the market.
Well, first and foremost, that formulation that you've done, you went in, all the bells and whistles, and I love the passion that you have and said, look, I just want to make a great formulation that works. And it's loaded up with over 55% of that product contains proteolytic enzymes. It contains the 4.5, the 3.0, the 6.0, and the peptidase. So it's got a full spectrum proteolytic blend that will break down virtually any protein from any food, any product, plant-based, animal-based, from Mars. It'll break this stuff down. Like there is when it comes to whatever you're eating from a protein side. But what was beautiful about that is you said, no, I want the next level. I want something that deals with whatever the diet is. And that's where the whole blend actually contains 17 different enzymes. It contains amylase to break down your carbohydrates. It takes alpha galactidase, which will help break down some of the sugars that you will find in food. It'll have glucomylase, another one that'll cover a different range of sugars that you might consume inadvertently. Invertase, maltase, another one, these hidden sugars that cause interruptions and metabolic problems and blood sugar issues and stuff. It cracks out all those. Then it gets into the plant fibers. A lot of people have a hard time eating plants, so they need the phytase, they need the hemicellulase and the cellulase, which will actually break down those difficult proteins that's actually a fibrous protein that it'll actually break that down. So people, if you're eating vegetables and you don't feel good or you can't have that big salad, and even though you need those nutrients, well, the product that you've put together here, P3E, will actually break all of that down. It also contains lactase for people that maybe the most famous enzyme in the world, people that can't digest milk, is because they don't produce lactase. And about a third of the population are in that category. And so it contains that as well. And on top of that, if that wasn't all, you also added in astrazyme. And so basically what astrazyme is we studied Chinese medicine, and found out there is a particular root called the astragalus root that is used in almost every single Chinese compound. Well, when we found out why it was used, that it turns out that that particular root actually activates and accelerates, it increases the potential of the enzymatic response. So we took that extract, threw this into that formulation as well in precise dosages, and that gave a 30 to 60% boost depending on the enzyme in its effectiveness. So even if someone came up with a product that said, you know what, it's exactly the same as the one that you've produced, John, guess what? It's not, because the Astrozyme just pushes that over the top by turbocharging all of the enzymes into the formulation. There's really nothing quite like it for absorbability, utilization, and regardless if you're on whatever diet, paleo, if you're on a vegetarian, if you're on a ketogenic, it doesn't matter. This product is going to break down the diet that you're currently on and make a big difference in your life. And that's really cool.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I was so excited when we developed this and everything that you suggested to put in there and all that to do. Like, I'm so excited for our audience to start using it because I know they're going to feel a difference right away. Talk to me for a second, because another thing that you stressed was that they were cultured enzymes and the difference there and why that's so important.
Yeah, so enzymes come in a lot of different formulas. So there's animal-based enzymes. So this is enzyme 101 for the general public. There's animal-based enzymes, which are only usable in a very limited pH range, okay? So then there is plant-based enzymes. So enzymes that would just be extracted directly out of your food, like people will take papaya or bromelain or pineapple and stuff, and you'll get a little bit of enzymes from that stuff. Then there is synthesized enzymes. And then there is there's also called systemic enzymes. Those are enzymes that might be used to just break up scar tissue that you wouldn't actually eat as food. You would have to eat those only on an empty stomach, like peptidase or serrapeptase would be one of those that's been used for scarring inside the body. And then there is what's called cultured enzymes. Now, a cultured enzyme means this is an enzyme grown on a very specific medium that allows you to increase the potency over a normal enzyme from 100 to 1,000 times. This is highly secretive, guarded information that only a handful of producers actually share. It's really hard to get this information. It took me years to get access to the people to learn how this process works. And it's proprietary information, but the bottom line is you're able to punch out an enzyme and it takes weeks. You can extract food enzymes from food and do that in a week or two. This process takes about 8 weeks to get the kind of potency. So just like if you were fermenting beer or wine or something, you got to let it work for a period of time before you get that, that premium spirit. It's the exact same process inside of the enzyme formula. Obviously, you're not fermenting alcohol. You're actually fermenting and creating a specific medium. And that extracted enzymes, and no chemicals used in the extraction process. So you just get the pure working enzymes to deliver an incredible result.
Yeah, I just love it when you share that, because that's the difference a lot of people don't always understand. When you're using a fermented ingredient that starts that breakdown process, it makes it more potent. When you make sure that you're using a sprouted ingredient, different things like that we do in a lot of our other products, because it just increases that potency, it increases the bioavailability. And so I love that there's a solution for that when it comes to enzymes as well. Now, talk to me just for a second about why it's important to take enzymes. For those that didn't listen to our last podcast, and I hope that they do, but for those that don't, maybe they're on a quick schedule, talk about the enzyme bank that you've shared with me before, and talk about why it's important, especially in our later years in life, 40s, 50s, 60s, why it's so important to take enzymes with every single meal.
Yes. So enzymes are responsible for everything from thinking to blinking in your body. And you have what's called, Dr. Howell put in his book, Food Enzymes for Health and Longevity. If people want to really dive in deep, I highly recommend that book, especially if you want to live long and strong, because it's directly the component that contributes to longevity. In other words, he said that the more enzymes that you have in your body, the longer that you will live. And he's proven this over and over again. Now, the thing is, by the time we're 40 years old, we have less than 30% of the enzymes that we had at birth. And if we've been eating, you know, a lot of like maybe in our past, like a lot of the farmed foods that has herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides, we probably have less than that. Pregnant women who've gone through pregnancy oftentimes find they have a hard time getting back their bodies and their metabolism after that, you know, especially some after the first, many after the second, and almost all of them after the third. And that's because they give up a big chunk of their enzyme bank account to the child to grow the child. And so they're struggling to get back to their weight. They're struggling to get back to that because they don't have enough enzymes in the bank account that says, you know what, I'm sorry, you don't have to fit into a size 2, right? Because I don't have the enzyme to do it. I'd rather keep your brain going and your heart going. But eventually you hit that, what I call the critical component, when your enzymatic pool slips below the essential metabolic process. This is when you start getting diabetes. This is when you start having heart disease. This is when you start can't remembering, you know, where did I put my keys this morning? All of those little things are tiny symptoms that are adding and piling up over and over, sharing with you that, hey, there's something wrong with your metabolism. And here's the thing. This is called common. But common, right, doesn't mean normal. And it's not normal for us. It's just, it's become common because of the food production and food distribution mechanism that's added enzyme inhibitors to it, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, preservatives, and dyes, stripped away the enzyme content that is naturally occurring in the food, and amplified this with an array of chemicals and agents that are interrupting our digestive process, that's leading to 12% of the emergency hospital visits, people going to hospitals in an ambulance related to digestive issues because they don't have the enzymes to break down their food. If you can't break down your food, you can't feed your brain, you can't feed your body, you can't have the energy that you want. And when you get to those ages, when you start adding this into your life, like I have for the last, you know, oh my God, almost going on 20 years now, I'm still in the gym hitting weights that I was when I was in my 20s. I require less sleep. I'm not saying this to brag, but I'm watching as people in my age group are falling apart, and I'm still going strong. And as is my clients and the people that understand this message, like yourself. We were just commenting about how great you look since the cultivation of this product and how you're hitting the gym and doing all these things. I mean, the testament is right there in front of me, and you can see it. And every single person I know that gets on that program as something you take before every single meal, you're preserving that bank account and you're adding dollars. It's like a savings account that you're adding because your body will when you consume the products that you have made here, the P3A, when you consume that, you're actually, it's like putting a deposit in your bank account. You'll actually convert that into other things. You'll make it into systemic enzymes. You'll make it into energy enzymes. You'll make it for brain functioning enzymes. And you're just going to be a lot healthier than you would be if you didn't.
Well, and that was my next question. Does it restock the bank account by taking external enzymes, or is it only going to help break down that meal?
That's a great question. And here's where I've street tested this. I've literally taken 1,000 capsules in a day, and then we would check the stool, because if you take any single nutrient, whether it's vitamin C to like magnesium or whatever thing, when you hit a certain component, you break what's called the GI barrier. This was developed in orthomolecular nutrition, in the 70s by, Dr. Linus Pauling and Hoffer and Hawkins, these super geniuses who ushered in healing the body using nutrition. The cool thing about enzymes is even at 1,000 capsules a day, when we check the stool, no enzymes present in the stool. That means the entire 1,000 capsules that I'm not suggesting everybody go do that, was actually absorbed and utilized by my body. I also experimented while fasting and would do 10-day fast. I'm actually in my 3rd day of a fast right now, haven't eaten anything, hadn't had a drink of water, hadn't had a piece of food. All right, I just drink water. It's all I drink. I just drink my water, and that's it. And what happens is that enzyme now will start working in a systemic way. It'll start repairing tissues. It'll start repairing muscles. It'll start reconnecting the dendrites in my brain during that process and making the neurotransmitters. And the more that I can pump into my system, the faster the recovery. And now that's been shown. We have documentation showing that athletes in combat sports, when it would take them 2 weeks to recover from a bruise, they had the proteolytic enzymes, they're recovered in 2 days. When they weren't able to fit for exercise and competition for 10 days, they're coming back in 3. And the reason is they have more workers, more of these little enzymes to go in there and accelerate these repair tissues. And so when you apply this to any day person in real life, they start to see the results over time. There's a compound effect, 30, 60, 90 days. You want to do a high course for 90 days and then titrate down so that, number one, it's not even just about eliminating the digestive issues. That goes away in 30 days. 60 days, you start to notice, hey, I'm sleeping less, my skin's starting to get a little vibrant. And by 90 days, it's like, okay, I'm an unstoppable machine. I get it. I understand why. I understand why John and Wade are so passionate about this program, because you know what? I can write checks that I didn't think I could anymore. And I'm talking energy checks.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so one last question, because you kind of alluded to it, and I just want to make sure the audience understands it, is, and we do this with our collagens, right? We suggest, if you haven't been taking a collagen supplement or anything like that, load up for the first 30 to 60 days, right? Triple the dose, help, fuel your body with a lot more of this collagens, and then you can go to a maintenance, right, of just a scoop a day. It's the same thing with enzymes as well, correct? I mean, you really, especially if you haven't been taking them, load up for the first 90 days.
100%. And I always I created what I call the bucket theory of nutrition. And the foundation is based on what we talked about, orthomolecular nutrition. If you have a deficiency in any particular product, number one, what happens is it's like you have a hole in let's say the total pool is the bucket, and you have a hole in that bucket, and you're trying to fill up. Now, if it was water in the bucket, the water's running out at a certain base depending on the hole. The hole, that's your lifestyle. Right? Now, if you had a stressful period in your life, that hole is going to increase. Maybe you got financial trouble. Maybe you went through a divorce. Maybe you had an illness, right? So we're not living in optimal, pristine conditions all the time that we want. And the thing is, if that bucket has never been filled up, you don't know what it's like to have a full bucket of that nutrient, of that vitamin, of that enzyme. And so by taking a course where you're taking a lot in that first 90 days, you fill up the bucket. So now you're operating from a full bucket. You only have to adjust how much you're putting into the system based on the hole in the bottom of the bucket, which is your lifestyle. And then you can, if you're going through an extra stressful time, you require energetic requirements, you can up the dosage of that enzyme. And if you're, everything's pristine and you're knocking it out of the park perfectly, you can titrate down on that. But if you do this with virtually every single supplement, you can go get a spectrum analysis to see what nutrients you're deficient in. You can target specific nutrients, specific supplements, load up on them, and go through this process. But with enzymes, what's the beauty of enzymes is there doesn't seem to be a ceiling on how many you take, the dosage that you take, or for how long you take it. And I've been taking what I would call super physiological dosages for almost 20 years. And I'm doing things that I never thought possible at this age. And that's why I'm so passionate about this subject.
Yeah, man, you're brilliant. You're brilliant. You're passionate. Like I'm just so glad to know you. I so appreciate you consulting us to make sure we put together the best product on here. Thank you for taking time to explain with our audience. I'll have you back on for future podcasts because I've got 50 million questions that I want to ask you that I know we don't have time for today. For those of you listening, if you want to learn more about P3E, you can go to organics.com. We have a 3-bottle and a 6-bottle package that we've highly discounted for those that do want to have that load up phase, so to speak. You really want to heal yourself, and then you can go into a maintenance phase of just a bottle a month. Feel free to check that out again. They're highly discounted, organics.com. If you want to watch this podcast again, or listen to it again, check out the show notes, the transcripts, go to empoweringyouorganically.com. As always, like us on iTunes, subscribe. You won't miss a single episode where we have more brilliant people like Wade come and share for free all of the information they've learned for 20, 30, 40 years. So Wade, you're a badass, man. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
My pleasure. Anytime, John.
Thanks, guys.